Marcus Cole had not eaten a real meal in 3 months, and the hunger had become a familiar companion that followed him through the cold metal corridors of Nexus Station like a shadow that refused to leave his side no matter how far he walked or how fast he ran from his problems. Worked salvage contracts during the day, pulling apart broken ships and selling the parts to merchants who always found reasons to pay him less than they had promised. And at night he slept in a rented storage locker that smelled like engine grease and forgotten. Dream 7 credits sat in his account, the sum total of everything he owned in a galaxy that stretched across billions of stars and contained wonders he would never be able to afford. Today was auction day at the Galactic Commerce Hub, and Marcus had decided to attend even though he knew he could not buy anything worth having. The auction hall was a massive dome of transparent crystal that looked out at the stars, and inside it gathered the wealthiest beings from 100 different worlds. Their clothes shimmering with fabrics that cost more than Marcus would earn in 10 Lifetimus Volanti merchants stood in clusters, their silver skin catching the light as they discussed which ships they would add to their fleets. And their voices sounded like wind chimes made of Isakathari nobles floated on anti-gravity platforms, their long robes trailing behind them like the tails of comets. And they looked down at everyone else with the quiet confidence of beings who had never known want or struggle. Dominion officers stood at attention in their black uniforms, their faces hidden behind helmets that displayed scrolling data about each item up for auction. And they bid with sharp hand gestures that brooked no argument. Marcus stood at the back of the hall, wearing his only clean shirt and trying not to look like someone who had crawled out of a storage locker, which of course he had. The auctioneer was a Grellian with 4 arms and 4 eyes and a voice that carried across the hall like thunder, rolling across mountains. And he moved through the lots with the practiced speed of someone who had sold ships and stations and entire planets to the highest bidder lot. After the lot went by in a blur of numbers that made Marcus feel dizzy as Volanti Cruiser sold for 2 million credits, its sleek silver hull gleaming on the holographic display like a promise of speed, and Free-to-Make Ethari Pleasure Yacht went for 5 million. Its interior decorated with living crystal gardens that would bloom in whatever colors the owner desired. But colors the owner desired. A Dominion frigate brought in 8 million. Its weapon systems capable of destroying a small moon with a single shot. Marcus watched it all with empty pockets and emptier hopes, wondering why he had even bothered to come. Then the auctioneer reached lot 2847. And something changed. The holographic display flickered and showed a ship unlike anything Marcus had ever seen before. And he found himself leaning forward without meaning to, drawn by something he could not name. The vessel was boxy and angular, with none of the elegant curves that marked Volanti design or the functional brutality of Dominion engineering. And its hull was covered in strange blackened plating that seemed to drink in the light rather than reflect it. No manufacturer sigils marked its surface, and no visible weapons arrays bristled from its sides. And it sat in the display like a puzzle box waiting to be opened. The auctioneer gestured at it with all 4 arms, and his voice carried a tone of dismissal that made Marcus bristle. Derelict vessel of unknown origin, the Grellian announced. No functional systems detected. Armor composition unidentified. Starting bid at 5 credits. Silence fell across the auction hall. And then the Volanti delegation began to laugh, their chittering voices sounding like breaking glass as they mocked the ugly little ship. The Kethare nobles did not even bother to look, their attention already moving to the next lot on their displays. The Dominion officers ran their scans and then shook their heads, their body language making it clear that the ship held nothing of value to their military minds. No takers at 5 credits? The auctioneer asked, his 4 eyes blinking in sequence as he struggled to hide his own amusement. Very well. 4 credits. 3 credits. 2 credits. Marcus raised his hand before he could stop himself, and every eye in the hall turned to look at the shabby human standing alone at the back. 1 human male bids 2 credits, the auctioneer said, and the words hung in the air like a joke waiting for its punchline. Are there any counterbids? The laughter came again, louder this time, and Marcus felt his face burn with embarrassment as the assembled aliens mocked his poverty and his foolishness, but no one raised a hand to bid against him. Sold. To the human for 2 credits, the auctioneer declared, already moving on to the next lot, already forgetting about the worthless ship and the worthless man who had bought it. Marcus spent his remaining 5 credits on a tow service to drag his new purchase to the salvage yards on the outer ring of the station, and he walked beside the tow cable as his ship drifted through the void, trying to see something in its dark hull that justified the strange pull he felt toward it. An elderly HFY merchant appeared beside him as if from nowhere, floating on a personal anti-gravity disk that hummed softly in the silence between the stars. Human, the merchant said, his voice like silk being dragged across stone. Do you know what you have purchased? A ship, Marcus replied, keeping his eyes on the dark vessel ahead. A coffin, the HFY corrected him. That vessel has been dead for longer than your species has possessed fire, and its secrets have resisted every attempt to unlock them. Marcus looked at the merchant, seeing the certainty in those ancient eyes, the absolute conviction that nothing good could come from a ship that no one else had wanted. 17 civilizations have tried to crack open that armor, the HFY continued. Scientists and engineers and warriors from races that were building starships when your ancestors were still learning to walk upright. And all of them failed. Then why did they put it up for auction? Marcus asked. The merchant smiled, and there was something cold in that expression. Something that made Marcus think of predators watching prey that did not know it was already dead, because the current owners grew tired of wasting resources on an unsolvable puzzle, and they hoped some fool would take it off their hands. And I was that fool, Marcus said. Yes, the HFY agreed. You were. The merchant floated away without another word, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and his 7-credit ship and the growing certainty that he had made either the worst mistake of his life or the best decision he would ever make. The salvage yard accepted the ship without comment, and Marcus set up his cot in the corner of the bay, determined to spend every waking moment studying his new prize. He had nothing left to lose and nowhere else to go. And sometimes that kind of freedom was worth more than all the credits in the galaxy. I guess I will be the 18th, he whispered to the dark hull. And though he could not be sure, he thought he saw the faintest flicker of light pulse beneath the black armor before vanishing like a dream upon waking. 6 weeks passed in a blur of frustration and failure, and Marcus Cole learned what it meant to fight against something that refused to be conquered. Tried everything the salvage yard had to offer, borrowing tools and equipment from workers who took pity on the strange human who slept beside a ship that everyone said was worthless. Plasma torches burned at temperatures hot enough to melt through Dominion battle armor, but they left no mark on the black hull of his vessel, not even a scorch mark to show that the fire had touched it at. All molecular acid strong enough to dissolve. The bones of a Volante warship pooled harmlessly on the dark surface before sliding away like water off a stone kinetic. Drivers that could punch holes through asteroid rock bounced off without leaving so much as a dent. And the workers began to shake their heads and mutter about the foolish human who had wasted his last credits on a coffin from the ancient past. But Marcus refused to give up, because giving up meant going back to the storage locker and the salvage contracts and the slow death of dreams that came from having nothing to hope for. Studied the ship during every spare moment, running his hands along its hull, searching for seams or panels or any hint of an entrance that might have been missed by the 17 civilizations that had tried before him. The answer came to him by accident on a night when exhaustion had made him clumsy and despair had made him angry. He was working with a cutting tool that slipped in his tired grip and sliced across his palm, and the pain made him cry out and slam his bleeding hand against the hull in frustration. Blood smeared across the black surface, red against darkness, and Marcus was about to pull away when he felt something that made him freeze in place. The metal was growing warm beneath his fingers, and the warmth spread outward from where his blood had touched the ship. Like ripples spreading across still water, he stood there for a long moment, afraid to move, afraid to breathe, afraid that if he did anything at all, the warmth would vanish, and he would be left with nothing but another failed experiment and a cut on his hand that needed bandaging, but the warmth remained. And when Marcus finally pulled his hand away, he saw that the blood had been absorbed into the hull, leaving no trace behind except for the memory of heat against his skin. He ran tests the next day, working with a focus that bordered on obsession. Valenthy blood samples produced no reaction, and the hull remained cold and dead beneath the silver fluid that other races considered Prachoskethary tissue brought no response, and neither did Grellian blood or Dominion genetic material or samples from a dozen other species that Marcus begged or borrowed or stole from the station's medical facilities. Nothing worked except human blood. Marcus stood before his ship on the 7th night of testing, a fresh cut on his palm and a heart full of hope that terrified him more than any failure ever had. He pressed his bleeding hand against the hull and waited. The warmth came faster this time, spreading outward in patterns that reminded Marcus of lightning frozen in the moment before it struck. And then the patterns became light, pale blue veins of luminescence that raced across the black armor like blood flowing through vessels that had been empty for millions of years. Abyss of luminescence that raced across the black armor like blood flowing through vessels that had been empty for millions of years. A pale blue veins of luminescence that erased the Vewens in Zemlin Lake, blood flowing through vessels that had been menacing for millions of years. Abyss seam appeared where no seam had existed before, splitting the hull in a perfect vertical line that was exactly the right height for a human to walk through without ducking. A door slid open with a soft hiss of ancient atmosphere escaping into the salvage bay, and Marcus stood at the threshold of something that no one in the galaxy had seen for longer than any civilization could remember. He stepped inside. The interior of the ship was beautiful in a way that made his chest ache with longing, and everything about it felt right in a way that nothing in his life had ever felt before. Control surfaces were sized perfectly for human hands, with buttons and switches and holographic interfaces that responded to his touch as if they had been waiting for him specifically. A pilot's chair sat at the center of the command deck, and when Marcus lowered himself into it, the cushions molded to his body like they had been designed from his exact measurements. Display systems flickered to life around him, projecting information in a language that looked almost familiar, like something he had seen in a dream or a history lesson about ancient Earth civilizations that had risen and fallen long before humanity reached for the stars. Then a voice spoke directly into his mind, bypassing his ears entirely and placing words in his thoughts with a gentleness that felt like a mother speaking to a child who had finally come home. Pilot detected, the voice said, and it was feminine and calm and filled with something that might have been relief. Genetic match confirmed at 99.7% concordance with creator species. Welcome aboard the Aegis 7, designation last dawn. Systems initializing now. Marcus gripped the arms of his chair as the ship hummed around him. Systems that had been dormant for epochs coming alive in response to his presence. Creator species? He asked out loud, not sure if the ship could hear him but needing to ask anyway. What do you mean by creator species? The architects, the voice replied. and there was reverence in the way it spoke the name. Your ancestors, the seeders of worlds, the builders of civilizations, the ones who came before all others. Marcus felt his understanding of the universe shift, beneath him like sand giving way under his feet. And he struggled to process what the ship was telling him. Humanity was supposed to be young and primitive, a species that had barely crawled out of its own gravity well before stumbling into a galaxy full of races that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. But this ship was responding to his blood and his blood alone. And it was calling his ancestors the creators of everything. Current power reserves are at 0.003%. The voice continued. Estimated time for full restoration is unknown, but this unit will serve the pilot to the best of its current capabilities. Alarms began to wail outside the ship, their harsh sound cutting through the wonder that had wrapped around. Marcus, like a warm blanket, station security had detected the power surge, and they would be coming to investigate the impossible readings emanating from a ship that everyone had saw it was dead. Marcus looked around the command deck of his vessel, at the controls that fit his hands and the chair that fit his body, and the displays that were slowly translating themselves into languages he could read. He had 7 credits to his name and a ship that was older than every civilization currently existing in the galaxy. He had questions that demanded answers and secrets that powerful people would kill to possess, and apparently humanity had some explaining to do about who they really were and where they had really come from. Last dawn, he said, testing the name on his tongue. Can you get us out of here? Affirmative, Pilot Marcus Cole, the ship replied. Fold space engines are functional at minimal capacity. Destination options are limited but available. The salvage bay doors were already opening as security forces rushed toward them, and Marcus could see weapons being raised and demands being shouted that he could not hear through the hull of his ship. Then take us somewhere safe, he commanded. Somewhere we can figure out what all of this means. The ship responded instantly, and Marcus felt reality fold around him like paper being creased by invisible hands when the universe unfolded again. Nexus Station was far behind them, and Marcus Cole sat alone in the command chair of an ancient vessel that had chosen him to carry its secrets into a future that was about to change forever. The news spread across the galaxy like fire racing through dry grass, jumping from station to station and world to world until there was no corner of civilized space that had not heard the story of the human who had awakened and architect vessel. Marcus Cole watched the reports from the safety of deep space, hidden in the shadow of a gas giant, while his ship slowly restored herself on the trickle of power his blood had provided. Every species in the galaxy had grown up with stories of the architects, the ancient beings who had supposedly seeded life across the stars before vanishing into legend and myth. The Volanthe believed the architects had blessed them with their silver skin and their affinity for space travel. The Cathari claimed descent from architect servants who had been granted wisdom beyond measure. The Dominion taught that the architects had chosen their world as the center of creation and that all other species were merely accidents of cosmic chance. Every civilization had built religions and philosophies and entire cultures around the idea that they were the true children of the architects, the inheritors of a legacy that stretched back to the beginning of time itself. And now a poor salvage worker from an insignificant planet called Earth had proven that all of those beliefs were wrong. The architects had been human. Reactions came swiftly and violently from every corner of the galaxy. The Volanthe hegemony demanded that Marcus surrender his vessel immediately for what they called proper academic study. But their warships massing at the border told a different story about their true intentions. The Cathari Consortium sent elegant diplomats who offered 17 billion credits for the ship. Enough money to buy a small planet. But their smiles never reached their eyes, and Marcus could see the hunger beneath their civilized masks. The Dominion did not bother with diplomacy at all, simply dispatching a battle fleet with orders to capture the vessel and eliminate any witnesses who might complicate their preferred version of galactic history. Marcus ran last. Dawn was still operating on emergency power, her systems functioning at a tiny fraction of their true capacity. But even crippled, she was faster than anything the modern galaxy could field. Against her, Dominion particle beams struck her black hull and scattered harmlessly into the void, their energy absorbed by armor that had been designed to withstand weapons far more terrible than anything the younger races could imagine. Navigation systems plotted courses through fold space that modern ships could not safely traverse, finding paths between the stars that had been forgotten for millions of years. And slowly, as Marcus continued to give his blood to the restoration matrices, Last Dawn began to remember what she had once been. Pilot designation Marcus Cole. The ship's voice spoke into his mind during the third week of their flight. I am detecting elevated stress hormones in your system. Query follows. Are you experiencing physical damage? Marcus laughed despite himself, slumped in his pilot's chair with dark circles under his eyes and a bandage wrapped around his forearm where he had made his latest donation to the ship's recovery. I am fine, he told her, watching the sensor display where 3 hegemony cruisers were falling behind, unable to match Last Dawn's speed even at her current diminished capacity. I am just trying to understand why my species apparently built ships that could create entire civilizations, and then forgot everything about who we were. The ship was quiet for a moment, and Marcus had learned to recognize these pauses as moments when she was searching through damaged memory banks for information that might help answer his questions. The architects did not forget. Last Dawn finally replied. They chose to forget. Memory cores indicate a deliberate regression protocol was initiated. Your species was preserved and simplified, and protected from external threats through obscurity and apparent primitiveness. Protected from what? Marcus asked, leaning forward in his chair as the questions that had been burning in his mind finally found words. The archives are severely damaged, the ship admitted, but fragments remain. There was a war, Pilot Marcus Cole. A war against something that came from outside normal space. The architects fought this enemy across millions of years and billions of star systems. Did they win? They won, Last Dawn confirmed. But victory came at a cost that the archives describe as unacceptable. The last protocol was seeding, spreading life across the galaxy, hiding the truth. Waiting. Waiting for what? For the enemy's return? The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implications that Marcus did not want to examine too closely before he could ask another question. The long-range sensors screamed with warnings that made his blood run cold. Something was emerging from fold space behind them. Something so massive that the sensors struggled to calculate its size. Something that made Last Dawn's damaged systems flare with recognition and what felt horribly like fear. Pilot, the ship said, and her voice carried an urgency that Marcus had never heard before. The archives have identified the incoming signature, cross-referencing with historical threat assessments. Match confirmed. The view screen activated without Marcus commanding it, showing an image that made his mind recoil in instinctive horror. The thing emerging from fold space was not a ship in any sense that Marcus understood. It was a shape that hurt to look at. Angles that should not exist folding in on themselves in ways that violated every law of physics he had ever learned. It was dark and bright at the same time, solid and empty, present and absent. And looking at it made Marcus feel like something was trying to reach through his eyes and pull his sanity out through the back of his skull. They have returned, Last Dawn whispered into his mind. The Hollow have returned, behind them. A Dominion fleet that had been pursuing them moments ago suddenly found itself facing something far worse than a stolen ancient vessel. Marcus watched in frozen horror as the hollow entity reached out with limbs that existed in dimensions he could not perceive and tore through the first Dominion warship like it was made of paper. 17 ships, each one crewed by hundreds of beings who had been trying to kill or capture him just moments ago. And the hollow destroyed them all in less than 30 seconds. Then, the impossible entity turned its attention toward the inhabited worlds of the system, toward billions of lives that had no idea death was coming for them. "Can we stop it?" Marcus demanded, his hands gripping the control surfaces with white-knuckled intensity. "At current power levels." "Negative," Last Dawn replied. Aegis-class vessels were designed to combat hollow entities in squadron formation. Minimum effective force is 12 ships. There is only one of you. "Incorrect," the ship said. And something new entered her voice, something that sounded almost like hope. "There are others, hidden across the galaxy. Sleeping as I slept, waiting as I waited, I am transmitting awakening codes now." Coordinates flooded onto his display. Locations scattered across known space and beyond. Ships buried on forgotten moons and hidden in asteroid fields and drifting in the empty void between star systems. 12 vessels waiting for pilots who could wake them. But pilot Marcus Cole, Last Dawn continued, "They will require human pilots to activate. Architect vessels respond only to architect blood." Marcus stared at the coordinates, thinking about Earth and its 8 billion humans who had never known the truth about their heritage. 8 billion potential pilots for ships that could fight the darkness now. Spreading across the stars, he opened a broadcast channel. Every frequency and every language, reaching out to every corner of the galaxy at once. His face appeared on screens across civilized space. A tired human with blood-stained bandages on his arm and desperation in his eyes. "My name is Marcus Cole," he said. "I am human, and apparently so are the architects." He transmitted the coordinates and the genetic data. The key to awakening the greatest fleet the galaxy had ever known. "I need pilots. 12 ships, 12 humans crazy enough to fly them. The alternative is what you can see happening in the Dominion border systems right now. On screens across the galaxy, the Hollow continued its feast. And civilizations that had mocked humanity for centuries finally understood the shape of the threat they faced. "I bought this ship for 7 credits, Marcus continued. "Best bargain I ever made. Who wants in?" The responses began flooding back almost immediately, and Marcus felt hope kindle in his chest for the first time since the nightmare had begun. The galaxy had never moved so fast for anything in recorded history, and the speed of the response to Marcus Cole's desperate broadcast would become the subject of legends for thousands of years to come. From Earth came the first volunteers, military pilots who had spent their careers flying machines that now seemed like toys compared to the vessels waiting for them across the stars. Commander Sarah Chun had been leading training exercises over the Pacific Ocean when the broadcast interrupted every communication channel on the planet, and she had her fighter pointed toward orbit before her commanding officers could even process what they had heard. Captain James Okonkwo left his post at the Mars Colony defense grid without a single word of explanation, stealing a transport shuttle and burning toward the nearest awakening coordinates. With fuel to spare and doubt left far behind, Darylena Vasquez was a civilian researcher who had never flown anything more complicated than a passenger shuttle, but her expertise in xenobiology made her invaluable, and she volunteered before anyone could tell her that scientists did not belong in the cockpits of ancient warships. From the stations and colonies scattered across human space came more volunteers, people who had been living on the edges of galactic society, working the jobs that no one else wanted and dreaming of something more miners from the asteroid belts, who had learned to navigate in 3 dimensions before they learned to walk, merchants, who had flown dangerous routes through pirate territory, just to earn enough credits to feed their family, salvage workers like Marcus himself, people who knew what it meant to take something broken and make it whole again. They came by the hundreds at first, then by the thousands, flooding communication channels with offers to pilot ships that most of them had never seen and fight an enemy that none of them truly understood. Last Dawn helped Marcus sort through the volunteers, analyzing their genetic profiles and their psychological assessments and their piloting skills, searching for the 12 humans who would be most likely to bond with the awakening vessels. The selection process took 40 hours, and by the end of it, Marcus had not slept and had given so much blood to speed Last Dawn's recovery that the ship had started refusing his donations. Out of concern for his health, pilot Marcus Cole, she chided him gently. "You cannot save the galaxy if you collapse from blood loss before the battle begins. I can rest when this is over," he replied, studying the final roster of pilots with eyes that burned from exhaustion. The 12 chosen humans came from every corner of Earth and every station where humanity had managed to establish a foothold in the unwelcoming galaxy. Sarah Chun would pilot Aegis II, her military precision making her ideal for coordinating squadron movements. James Okonkwo would take Aegis V, his defensive instincts perfect for protecting the more vulnerable members of the formation. Elena Vasquez surprised everyone by bonding instantly with Aegis X, the most scientifically advanced vessel in the fleet, and her ship's weapon systems responded to her commands like they had been waiting for her specifically. The other 9 pilots were equally matched to their vessels, and watching them arrive at the hidden locations where the ships had waited was like watching family members reunite after a separation that had lasted millions of years. Each awakening followed the same pattern that Marcus had experienced aboard Last Dawn human. Blood touching ancient hulls, warmth spreading through armor that had been cold for epochs, blue light racing along patterns that had been dark since before any current civilization had existed. Doors opening to reveal interiors perfectly designed for human bodies and human minds, and voices speaking into thoughts, welcoming pilots home to ships that had never forgotten what they were built to protect. The Aegis fleet assembled in the shadow of a dead star, 12 vessels blazing with restored power, their black hulls burning with blue fire that spoke of weapons and shields and engines that the modern galaxy had never imagined. Marcus looked at his squadron through Last Dawn sensors and felt something swell in his chest that might have been pride or might have been terror or might have been some combination of both. These were ordinary people who had answered a call they did not fully understand, trusting a stranger they had never met, preparing to fight an enemy that had nearly destroyed the most advanced civilization in galactic history. Squadron communication established. Last Dawn announced, "All pilots reporting ready status. Shall I open a channel?" "Do it," Marcus said. 11 faces appeared on his display. Humans from different nations and different backgrounds and different walks of life, united now by blood and destiny, and the simple fact that they were the only ones who could do what needed to be done. "I'm not going to give you a speech," Marcus told them, "because I do not have any words that could possibly prepare you for what we are about to face." He saw fear in some of their eyes and determination in others, and something that looked like wonder in almost all of them. The Hollow destroyed the architect civilization. He continued, "The same civilization that built these ships and seeded life across the galaxy, and then chose to become us. They fought this enemy for millions of years and they won. But winning cost them everything they were. Then how are we supposed to beat them?" James Okonkwo asked, his deep voice carrying the question that all of them were thinking. because we are what they became, Marcus replied. The architects did not disappear because they were weak. They disappeared because they understood that strength means being able to change, to adapt, to become something new when something old no longer works. He paused, looking at each face in turn. They became us, he said. And now we get to show the Hollow what humanity can do. The coordinates for the Hollow's current location appeared on every display, showing a sector of space that had once held 17 inhabited worlds and now held nothing but debris and death. Squadron Formation Alpha, Marcus commanded, and his voice carried an authority he had not known he possessed. We jump in 30 seconds. The ships moved into position around him, 12 points of blue fire arranging themselves into a pattern that Laston's tactical systems identified as optimal for engaging a single hollow entity. Marcus took a deep breath and tried not to think about how many things could go wrong in the next few hours. All ships, he said. Jump. Reality folded around the Aegis squadron. And when unfolded again, they were facing something that made even the ancient warships hesitate in recognition of an enemy that had hunted their creators across the ages. The Hollow turned toward them, and Marcus could feel its attention like a weight pressing against his mind. Cold and hungry and utterly alien squadron, he commanded. Attack. 12 ships surged forward, and the battle for the galaxy began. The first exchange of fire lit up the darkness of space like a new star being born. Architect weapons meeting hollow defenses in a collision of forces that had not clashed for millions of years. Marcus felt Laston responding to his commands before he even finished thinking them. The bond between pilot and vessel growing stronger with every passing moment around him. His squadron moved like a single organism, covering each other's blind spots and exploiting the momentary weaknesses that appeared in the Hollow's impossible geometry. But the enemy was ancient and powerful and utterly without mercy. And within the first hour of combat, Marcus watched 3 of his pilots die. Aegis 4 vanished into a fold in space that should not have existed, its pilots screaming over the communication channel before the signal cut off forever. Aegis 8 was torn apart by limbs that materialized from nowhere, its hull crumbling like paper despite armor that had survived the death of Stars. Aegis She sacrificed herself to save Elena Vasquez, throwing her ship into the path of an attack that would have destroyed the scientist and her irreplaceable vessel. Marcus felt each death like a physical blow, but he did not have time to mourn, because the battle was still raging and the Hollow was still hungry, and there were billions of lives depending on what happened in the next few hours. All remaining ships, he commanded, forcing his voice to remain steady. Concentrate fire on the primary mass. We end this now. 8 ships responded, pouring everything they had into the heart of the darkness, and somewhere in that impossible geometry, something began to break. The battle lasted 3 hours, and every second of those hours felt like an eternity stretching out toward infinity. Marcus Cole had never known exhaustion like this, had never pushed himself so far beyond the limits of what he thought his body and mind could endure. But every time he felt himself flagging, he remembered the pilots who had already given their lives, and he found new strength in the depths of his determination. The Hollow was ancient beyond comprehension, a predator from the spaces between spaces that had hunted the architects across millions of years and billions of star systems. And it had learned patience during those long ages of pursuit and consumption. But the architects had not been helpless prey. They had built the Aegis vessels specifically to fight this enemy, incorporating weapons and shields and tactics that had been refined through countless battles. And now those weapons sang again in the hands of pilots who carried architect blood in their veins. Sarah Chen coordinated the squadron with military precision, her voice calm and steady over the communication channels, even as she pushed her ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. James of Conco held the defensive line whenever the Hollow tried to break. Through their formation, his vessel absorbing attacks that would have destroyed lesser ships. Elena Vasquez analyzed the enemy's patterns with scientific detachment, finding weaknesses that the others exploited with ruthless efficiency, and Marcus led from the front. Last dawn blazing with power that grew stronger with every passing minute as the ship finally approached something like her full restoration. But the Hollow was not defeated easily. It adapted to their tactics, learning from each exchange, finding new ways to strike at the human pilots who dared to challenge its supremacy. One by one, more ships fell. HFY was caught in a gravity anomaly that crushed it into a sphere no larger than a fist. Its pilot dead before he could even scream. Aegis 12 tried to outmaneuver an attack and flew directly into a dimensional fold that scattered its atoms across 1,000 different planes of existence. Aegis 3 saved the squadron by ramming the Hollow directly, buying precious seconds for the others to regroup, sacrificing everything so that the mission could continue. By the end of the second hour, only 8 ships remained, and Marcus could feel the exhaustion and grief weighing on every pilot who still drew breath. "It is not enough," James Okonkwo said over the command channel, his voice heavy with despair. "We are hurting it, but we are not killing it. And we cannot keep this up forever." Marcus knew he was right. The Hollow was wounded, its impossible geometry flickering and unstable in ways that suggested real damage, but it was still fighting, still hungry, still reaching out with limbs made of twisted space to destroy the pilots who opposed it. And then last, Dawn spoke into his mind with a voice that carried something he had never heard from her before. "Pilot Marcus Cole, there is another option. Tell me," he demanded. "Full power integration," the ship explained. "A complete merger between pilot and vessel, combining human intuition with architect technology at a level that was never intended for extended use." What happens to the pilot? There was a pause that told Marcus everything he needed to know. "The ship will survive," Last Dawn admitted. "The pilot may not." Marcus thought about his life before the auction, the storage locker and the salvage contracts and the 7 credits that had seemed like such a pathetic sum at the time. He thought about the pilots who had died following him into battle, good people who had answered as strangers, call because someone needed to stand between the darkness and the innocent. He thought about Earth and its billions of humans who had never known the truth about their heritage, people who deserved the chance to learn what they really were and what they could become. "Do it," he said. "Pilot." "I must advise against." "That was not a request," Marcus interrupted. "Do it now." The integration was not painful in any way that words could describe. It was simply overwhelming. A flood of information and sensation and awareness that expanded Marcus's consciousness beyond anything he had ever imagined possible. He felt the ship around him not as a machine, but as an extension of his own body. Every system and weapon and sensor becoming part of himself in a merger that blurred the line between human and technology. He felt the other pilots through their connection to their own vessels, their fears and hopes and determination flowing into him like rivers feeding an ocean, and he felt the Hollow, truly felt it for the first time, understanding its nature in a way that his merely human mind could never have grasped it. It was not evil in the way humans understood evil. It was simply hungry, a creature from a dimension where consumption was the only law and survival meant devouring everything that existed, but understanding did not mean acceptance. And Marcus reached out with his expanded consciousness to grasp the threads of reality that the Hollow was using to anchor itself in normal space. "All ships," he commanded, and his voice echoed across dimensions that human ears could not hear. "Follow my lead." The 8 remaining Aegis vessels moved as one, guided by Marcus's expanded awareness, striking the Hollow at points that his merely human perception could never have identified. The creature screamed, not in sound but in something deeper, a cry of rage and pain and disbelief that every sentient being in the system felt in the core of their being. It tried to flee, tried to fold back into the space between spaces where it had hidden for so long. But Marcus was there, blocking every exit, sealing every dimensional fold, trapping the predator in a cage of pure will and architect technology. Now, he commanded. And the final barrage began. 8 ships fired everything they had into the heart of the hollow. Weapons that had been designed specifically for this moment, pouring destruction into an enemy that had seemed invincible. The creature came apart at the quantum level, its impossible geometry unraveling like a tapestry, being pulled thread by thread. And Marcus felt its final scream echo across the dimensions as it dissolved into nothing. Then the integration ended, and Marcus Cole knew only darkness. He woke floating in space, his body encased in a cocoon of hardened light that pulsed with the same blue glow as Last Dawn's restored systems. The ship drifted beside him, her hull scarred and damaged but intact, her lights blinking in patterns that somehow conveyed relief and joy, and something that felt remarkably like love. Pilot Marcus Cole. Last Dawn's voice spoke into his mind. Life signs stable, integration damage within acceptable parameters. You will require extensive regeneration, but you will survive. The others? Marcus managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. 7 pilots survived. They are currently asking about your condition with considerable urgency and what I believe humans would describe as colorful language. Marcus laughed, and the movement sent pain shooting through his rebuilt body. But it was the good kind of pain, the kind that meant he was still alive to feel it around them. Ships were gathering. The Lanthi and Cathari and Dominion vessels that had arrived too late to help with the battle, but early enough to witness its conclusion. They kept their distance. Sensors trained on the black ships that floated in formation around their wounded leader. And Marcus could imagine the conversations happening on those bridges. They, architects, had been human. Humanity had destroyed the hollow everything the galaxy believed about itself had just been proven wrong. And the implications of that truth would reshape civilizations for generations to come. Pilot, Last Dawn said. I am receiving communication requests from 417 vessels representing 23 different species. How would you like me to respond? Marcus thought about the scared salvage worker who had bought a worthless ship for 7 credits. And he thought about the man floating in space now, surrounded by ancient warships piloted by humans who had learned the truth about their heritage. Tell them we are not taking meetings right now, he said. Tell them humanity will be in touch when we are ready. He looked out at the stars, and all those worlds where humans had been living as second-class citizens in a galaxy that had never respected them. And he thought about the other Aegis ships, still sleeping in hidden places across the cosmos. The architects had not abandoned the galaxy. They had become the galaxy, planting their children on 1,000 worlds, letting them grow and adapt and become something new. Humanity was just the first to remember. But they would not be the last Dawn, Marcus said. Take us home. We have a lot of people to wake up. The ship turned toward distant Earth, toward 8 billion humans who had never imagined they were anything more than cosmic accidents, toward a future that the architects had planned and humanity would now inherit. The 7-credit ship sailed on toward dawn, and behind her the galaxy held its breath and waited to see what the children of the architects would do next.